Welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Lore. I am Austin, your co-host for today's adventure.
And I'm Abby. We are so glad you're here.
So today in Middle-earth, we are going to learn about the creation of the sun, the moon, and the coming of the first men.
And over in Westeros, we are headed to the Westerlands to cozy up with our favorite villains, the Lannisters.
So, grab a flagon of ale and let's go on an adventure! Welcome back, everybody, to the lands of Middle-earth, where we just left off with a heck of a couple of chapters, if you ask me. Fair warning, this is a bit of a change of pace this week. We're kind of going back down into what I'm going to call a lore dive. Last week was pretty heavy with the whole Fëanor, and then Morgoth killing Fëanor's dad, and then Fëanor kinslaying, and, you know, kinslaying's no good, even with the old gods. So, don't get too comfortable. I will say this is just kind of a quick stop, give you some lore on Middle-earth and stuff, and then these next few chapters, a lot goes down, but we'll get into that soon. So we're going to start with chapter 11, which is called The Sun, the Moon, and the Return of the Noldor. So we are going to continue a segment that I introduced last week that I had way too much fun with. It was what I'm calling the Austin Swanson reads dramatic ChatGPT intro.
With your narrator voice.
With my narrator voice. Yes. Here's what ChatGPT gave me this week.
Okay.
The world is dark. The two trees have fallen, their light stolen, their beauty lost. Valinor grieves, but hope is not yet extinguished. From the ruins of Telephrion and Lorien, final gift is born. The last flames of a dying paradise. In Middle-earth, Morgoth reigns in shadow. But soon, the sky itself will burn anew, and in the north, the exiled Noldor step into their destiny, their fates forever tied to the light, and the doom of the sun and moon.
Oh, and it rhymed at the end?
I mean, AI is terrifying, don't get me wrong, but like, I was pretty impressed with this week. I was like, okay, ChatGPT, pop off, queen. So yeah, basically kind of what the intro said. We are in a very pivotal moment. And then I kind of a recap for last week of my Millennial Talk episode. Very quick. Melkor kills Fëanor's dad, father, Finwë. He's dead right at the gates, right after Melkor just destroyed the two great trees of Valinor, Telephrion and Lorelin. And this kind of sends Fëanor into a bit of a tizzy, and he kind of loses his mind just a bit. And he decides, you know, me and the Noldor, we're going to leave. And we're going to go back to Middle-earth where we can kind of do our own thing, have some free will, if you will. And throw in a couple of harsh remarks and some kinslaying, and bing, bang, boom, Fëanor and the Noldor elves are back in Middle-earth. Meanwhile, Fëanor's half-brother, Fingolfin, and Galadriel, I'd like to point that out, saw all this happen, do not agree with it, but they do decide to go north because, remember, Fëanor burned all the ships. So they do decide to go north, kind of wrap around through a very treacherous, cold trek. A lot of elves die, but they do make it to the other side, and that's kind of where we are at. So in Middle-earth during this time, like I said before our last episode, the Sindar elves are just kind of jade chilling. They got Thingol, who is going to be kind of the next main character, if you will, of the story. And this is the guy who froze when he saw the love of his life for years.
I can't.
I mean, it's equally like on. It's also like, you know what I mean? It's like, I won't question Thingol, but like you're cool, but like, come on. And then Morgoth unleashes his first wave of orcs upon the Sindar elves, who are very unprepared because they don't really have many weapons at this point. You know, Fëanor hasn't been here to kind of show them how to craft things out of the jewels of the earth. But that's where the dwarves come in. The dwarves come in, show them Mithril, and be like, y'all can fight back, and like, we'll join you. I don't know why I got a little southern with that, but I just feel like the dwarves kind of, you know, I feel like they're y'all folk, you know? So they come in, swoop in, save the day, and the elves and the dwarves, for now, are cool. So now the Sindarian elves have Mithril at their
disposal.
Yes, that's a good word for it. And can fight back against Melkor and his or / Morgoth, and his waves of orcs. So now we are caught up. We're back in the present, if you will, and there is a bit of a problem with the current world. There is no light. So the 2 trees were supplying the light for the world, and as we learned, Melkor destroyed them, and now there is kind of no light, so everybody's in a bit of a perpetual darkness, and it's terrifying. So this is kind of the first big challenge for the Valar before they can kind of deal with the whole Noldor situation. So Manwë asks Yavanna and kind of says, like, I need you to fix this for me because I don't know what to do. Manwë's in a bit of a panic. Again, he's the leader of the Valar, so he's supposed to kind of have it together. But he's a little lost about what to do right now. And Yavanna and Nienna kind of decide to team up and say, we'll heal these trees, we'll get the light back, and try to bring back some happiness to this world. So Yavanna sings her songs to the trees, and Nienna uses her tears to try to get them back to life, and nothing happens. So now they're a little panicked as well, and they're kind of lost. And Tolkien says kind of that last bit of hope, something happens. A branch from Teleprion produces 1 great flower of silver, and from Lorlian, a single fruit of gold.
All right.
The name of the episode. So Yavanna takes these flowers from the trees, and after she does, both the trees kind of wither for good, where their lifeless stems still stand in Valinor to this day. Tolkien says that the elves use these stumps, if you will, as a memorial that even the greatest joy can vanish. I'm like, that is dark, man.
Yeah.
So, see, Tolkien's not all happy-go-lucky. I mean, there's some depressing things in here. So, yeah, like I said, the Valar kind of, they thought about taking the branches out, or the stumps out. But Manwë and a couple of the other Valar were like, nope, this needs to be a reminder that, not everything is good in this world, and even the best things, even they too shall pass. So they always need to be more prepared. So, in weeks past, I've always talked about how we thought the Valar were a little ignorant.
Right, naive, I think.
Naive, that's the word. So I think the stumps are a reminder of their naivete.
Got it.
And how they need to be a little more aware that not everything's good. Melkor, Morgoth is bad.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Amen to that. Put that on a bumper sticker.
Or in a Taylor Swift song.
Oh, is that where it's from?
No, it's. I mean, it is in one, but she didn't invent it.
Not yet. But yeah, I think it is depressing, but I get what I think this is just Tolkien telling us that they are taking the next step in real life and realizing what life is about. It's not all good. There's going to be a lot of bad, and this is a reminder that even though things are quote unquote perfect, there could always be something lurking in the shadows, if you will. So, we now have these 2 flowers, a gold and a silver flower, and Aule and Manwë take these flowers and make vessels for them. Now, he says vessels, and I'm not really sure what he means, and this question will come up more as I go on here, because I am still confused after doing some research and looking up, and you'll see here why in a second. So, Varda, who is the wife of Manwë, the queen, yes, queen, takes them and gives them the power to traverse the lower regions of Ilmen and set them to voyage upon appointed courses above the girdle of the earth.
Stop it with the
from
girdle.
From the west unto the east and to return. I had that quote because they said girdle again.
Stop it with the
girdles. Why do they keep doing this to us? Basically, this is a ta-da moment. The sun and the moon are here. So that whole sentence is basically just saying Varda gave the power to these vessels that hold the flowers to start in the west in the sky and then go down to the east and then kind of come back around.
Okay.
So they have now created their ultimate light source. They don't need to rely on the trees anymore. It's high in the sky, so they think it's safe for Morgoth / Melkor, and problem number 1, quote unquote, solved. What I kind of wanted to talk about and touch on here is something that it's a very quick sentence in the Silmarillion, but I think it gives credence to a lot of lore in this book and even in the movies. So when Morgoth sees the sun go up, he it describes him being like, yes, he's angry that they fixed the situation, but they also say he's a little bit pained by it. And it even mentions how his sons, aka the orcs, are also pained by it. So I think this is Tolkien introducing the concept that daylight hurts Melkor / Morgoth and Sauron and all of these deceivers and the orcs as well. You can really see this happen in the movies in Return of the King. It's when Gandalf and Pippin are at Minas Tirith at this point. They've kind of separated from the group. So here's the full lore. Pippin, he grabbed the Palantir, talked to Sauron. Sauron thinks Pippin has the ring. So Gandalf says, all right. Well, sorry. Pippin in the vision saw that Sauron was going to attack Minas Tirith. So Gandalf says, 2 birds, 1 stone. I'll take the guy that Sauron thinks has the ring, take him to Minas Tirith, kind of lure him into a bit of a trap, if you will, so then Aragorn and everybody else can come in and save the day. So in that moment when Gandalf and Pippin are there in Minas Tirith, kind of taking that deep breath before the battle, they're having a conversation on like a kind of a patio that overlooks Mordor. And from Mordor, you can kind of see a host of clouds moving towards them. And Gandalf explains this lore item of like, Sauron is doing that to cover the daylight for his orcs so they can move forward. So it's fascinating to me because this one sentence in the Silmarillion basically set the course for lore for the rest of the series.
Okay.
So it's not mentioned a lot after this. I mean, it will talk about it later in the books, as we'll see, that Morgoth does not like the sun. But this is the first direct instance that Melkor / Morgoth and all the bad guys do not like the sun, and it physically pains them to be in it. So I thought that was a fun little...
Isn't that just... I could be wrong, but don't vampires, like, they can't go in the sun?
Yes.
And there's other old... I can't remember. Like, there's other things that, like, turn to stone in the sun and stuff like that. So maybe...
It is basically drawing on that fact of orcs are a little bit based on vampires because they dwell in the depths and they can't come out during the day.
The real vampires, not Edward.
I mean... Sorry,
friends. They don't sparkle.
You don't like those movies?
No, I do, but when I'm just sick and I just need to zone out, not because I think they're real.
I mean, those are movies that define a generation. Yes, anyways, but that is a good point. Orcs are loosely based on vampires and goblins, kind of a mix.
Okay.
So, next on the Valar's to-do list, if you will, is their security issue. So they see that clearly Valinor / Aman is not perfect the way they thought it was, and they kind of realize that it is susceptible to attack and to Morgoth's. He has access to it, so they're like, we need to cut that off. So what they kind of do is, to make it a safer place, they raise a massive, impassable mountain barrier, and it is called the Pelasgar. No, the
Pelasgar.
Pelasgar, yes. It's so hard for me to pronounce these words. Okay. So that no one, not even the Noldor, this is no one gets access, can return to Aman. Only Arendelle in the distant future will ever cross this barrier again, and you will... we'll talk about that later. That's a story for another day. But this chapter also takes kind of a quick peek into what Melkor is up to. So, he is not happy with this new sunlight, whatever it is. He is actually so unhappy that he actually tries to attack the sun and the moon all by himself. So this is where the vessel thing gets confusing for me, because it's not described very well in the book, and I don't really know what he means by vessel. I don't know if vessel is a person, or if it is just like a matter of energy, or
a boat.
Or a boat. Yeah, I don't know. But he does give the sun and the moon names. So the sun is Arian, and the moon is Tilion. Oh. So I don't know. And here, I'll mention this too. So this is the next confusing part, is that he does not talk about if he's two beings are humanoid or if they're just spirits or whatever. A bit of a lore about Aryan and Tylion is a little problematic. So Tylion is a guy and Aryan is a woman.
Okay.
Tylion basically is obsessed with Aryan, so he like chases her. And it's just I think it's trying to describe the moon phases with the sun.
Oh, okay.
But he's like obsessed with Aryan, so the moon's always chasing the sun.
Oh.
And I apologize, audience, I just smashed the microphone. He's always chasing the sun, and him doing this causes a lot of eclipses, and eclipses of Middle-earth are never good. Mm-hmm. So Tylion causes a lot of problems in Middle-earth, and he is like endlessly obsessed with Aryan, who it never really says that she likes him that much back. So to me, it's a little problematic, but you know.
It's always the men.
It's always the men, man. God. So anyways, yeah, whatever these beings are, these vessels, I don't know. Okay. But there's your history about the sun and moon, who apparently have feelings and emotions. Well. But I think this was just Tolkien trying to give a lore reason to moon phases, and then the sun still doing its constant circle, but you know, the moon being in different spots and having eclipses. I assume that is what this whole shebang about love chasing was. But anyways, Melkor, Morgoth, tries to attack Aryan and Tylion, and they do fend him off apparently with ease. So that's good that Morgoth can't destroy the sun and moon.
Yeah.
So now Melkor kind of realizes that he's been thwarted again, and he realizes he really can't do anything about the sun, so he has to kind of work around that now. And right after this battle with the sun, he has a brand spanking new problem. Some would even say a bigger problem. The Noldor, now that they have moved from Aman over to Middle-earth, they have gathered outside of his gates, and they are ready for war. I mean, they are angry, they are upset. And I should mention these are Feanor's Noldor. It is him and his army. Fingolfin and Galadriel are not far behind, and they will be involved in this mix, but just for timing and lore's sake, it is Feanor and his Noldor army that are there first. Okay. So this kind of begins what is called the Dago Nuin Gileath, or the Battle Under the Stars, which I think is a sick name.
It's jazzy.
It is jazzy. And this is a battle that will define the rest of Middle-earth. It is the first and greatest battles against Morgoth. The numbers that are described are, I mean, we're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of troops on a battlefield. So the reason it's so big is because, you know, there really hasn't been, besides Feanor killing his kin,
right,
there hasn't been any war. So there's elves who never die and have kids. So, I mean, we've got a lot of elves out there who are now angry, upset, and ready to go to war. So and that is why I wish we could have a show about this, because that would be so cool, but it's fine. But that's chapter 10. And it's just kind of, I'm telling you, this is a deep breath before things go in. And chapter 11 kind of falls into that too, where we're just kind of getting a backdrop into what's happening, or a deep dive into what's happening in the background before things hit the fan again. So I'll just real quick go into chapter 11. It is called Of Men, and I think you can assume what that means. So now begins what is described as the years of the sun, which sounds
pleasant.
Sounds nice. Like,
pleasant.
Sounds beachy. I want to go to a beach. Basically, what the years of the sun are is the sun, as you will see, and I will talk about, gives new growth to a lot of things. And I think before, yes, there were trees and grass and everything, but now everything is plentiful. So just for elves records, they just call it the years of the sun because it's a time of growth. Yes, there is conflict, but there is also growth not only in plants and mountains and rivers, but also of people. Like I said, change becomes very rampant. The grasses grow longer and the trees grow taller due to the light of the sun. That's good science right there. But most notably, the first rising of the sun on the very first day brought about the younger children of the Iluvatar, who awoke in the eastern lands of Middle-earth. And yes, as you could assume, these younger children of Iluvatar are men. And even though they were born pretty far in the east, as science tells us and common knowledge, the sun comes up in the west. So you can kind of think of these men as...
You mean goes down in the west?
Sorry, I meant east.
Oh, okay.
I haven't had coffee today, guys. I'm so sorry. Yeah, since it goes down in the west,
Okay.
they kind of chase the sun, if you will. So they start in the east, but since the sun's kind of going away from them, they chase it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just Tolkien telling, like, that's how they're saying they got so far west, is because they were chasing the sun.
Got it. They had to take their cool sunset pics.
Well, of course. Mm-hmm. It's the years of the sun. Hashtag years of the sun. So once they are born, the Eldar kind of give these new children a lot of names. I have written down just a few because I thought they were fun.
Can't wait.
So we have, first off, the second people, which I feel like is a little bit of like a ha-ha. Like, we were first, you're second.
Like how siblings are like, I'm number one, you're number two.
Yeah. You're the youngest, one of those. Mm-hmm. Next is Hildor, which is Elvish for the followers. Okay. We have Apananar, which is Elvish for the afterborn. Again, still a lot of this whole, like, we were first.
That's kind of icky.
Yep. We have Engwar, which means in Elvish, the sickly. Yeah, I was like, dang, guys, like, there's no good, you can't say anything positive about these people.
Nope.
Next is Firamar, which is the mortals.
All right, fine.
Which, that's a fact. That makes sense. I'm fine with that. Next one, they called them the usurpers.
Oh,
I'm like,
stop it.
You guys and your entitlement, my goodness. The next was the strangers, the inscrutable, the self-cursed.
Self-cursed.
Yes. The heavy-handed, the night-fearers.
Okay, I like the last one.
And then the last one is the children of the sun, that's the one we're going to go with because it's the nicest.
I'm a child of the sun.
I like that one the most, and it's the best. It's the nice. I think it's the only nice one they really gave them, to be honest.
Right.
But there was a few, and there is a lot more. I just picked those because I liked them the most. But I can tell you there was not, besides the last one we said, there was not any kind words from the elves, which kind of sets the tone for some events going forward. But in the early days of men, Tolkien specifically says in Silmarillion, not much is recorded. So I still struggle with this book, trying to figure out who is the quote unquote narrator, because it says like there's no record.
Right.
So like, what is that? Aren't you the author?
Yeah. Well, I think.
Well, I guess it is Christopher that put this together, right? Because Tolkien technically didn't write this book. This is Christopher kind of parsing.
Taking his notes and
yeah. So I'm wondering if it's Christopher kind of saying my dad didn't write anything more about this time.
Yeah.
So that's why I just get confused. I don't know if it's J.R.R. saying that or if it's Christopher saying that.
Right.
And I assume because it's so direct and saying there's no record, I'm guessing it's Christopher saying my dad didn't write anything more about events in this time and I have no more input for it. Is my guess.
Okay.
All that is really known is that Ulmo was kind of the primary caretaker of the men, because the rest of the Valar are still a little bitter and a little scared after the whole Noldor fiasco. So they are still kind of hiding back in Aman and Valinor, and they really don't want anything to do with the men right now. Ulmo kind of takes it upon himself to kind of show them the way and give them a guiding hand, a little gentle push, if you will. So what he does is he sends them messages by stream and flood. And I, once again, have no idea what that means. You can interpret it as he's sending them messages in a bottle, or he's forming shapes of letters in the water for them. Regardless, what he's doing doesn't work because, like I said, these men, you can think of them as babies. Yes, they have...
I always think of men as babies. Don't worry.
Well, there it is.
Just kidding.
Yes, these people are, full grown and all that, but they were just put on this planet. They don't really know what to do. So they're still developing their own languages, their own ways of communicating. their own technologies. So it's a very early period for them. What I found really fascinating here is that, one, they fall in love with the sea, which is a huge indicator for a big faction of men coming here pretty soon. And two, they find dark elves. And this is the first time dark elves have been mentioned. And I tried to do some Googling about dark elves in Middle-earth, and I didn't get much. So I don't know what dark elves are, if they're good, if they're bad, if they're just like elves who live in more secluded locations. Mm-hmm. But the way they helped the humans, it seemed good. Like they didn't do anything bad. So what the dark elves did is basically just took them under their wing, kind of gave them the lay of the land, showed them some technology, gave them some tools, stuff like that.
So not dark as in Morgoth, dark as in or we don't know.
We don't know.
Okay.
So I didn't know if it was a skin color thing. I didn't know if it was because he does talk about some elves reside in the mountains, kind of like dwarves. So I don't know if that means they're residing in the dark.
Got it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He often uses dark as a bad metaphor.
Right.
So I don't know. It's one of those three. I don't know which it is. I'm guessing it's either the color of their skin or their mountain elves, because they did help the men.
Yeah.
And they were, they really did take them under their wing. They even told the men a lot about the lore of Middle-earth, told them about the gods, the Valar, about Eru, and all that. And they even talked about how Dark Elf talked about how they came from Valinor. So again, it's very confusing where their timeline is, and that's some more research I'll do for a future episode. But the humans kind of chalk up Valinor as like like there's no perfect place, like that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So they chalk it up as mere rumor and legend, and that obviously carries forward all the way through Lord of the Rings because men don't think it exists. They think when the elves sail out, they're just like, they're just going to basically die.
Right.
But it is a real place. So the rest of this chapter basically just describes the difference between men and elves. Basically, elves and men are very similar in stature and look, but that's where their similarities kind of diminish or stop, if you will. Elves are immortal, men are not. Elves cannot get sick, men can. That's why they called them
the sickly.
Sickly.
Got it.
Elves are stronger and kind of harder to hurt in battle, and they describe men as very brittle. But what men do have on elves, and that the elves kind of envy, is that men seem to have kind of the same fire that Fëanor had. That they are kind of willing to go out and explore and kind of push the boundaries of their own kingdom. They don't get complacent like elves do. And there are some elves who even envy that kind of attitude. And it's even this attitude that some elves think that Eru and the gods favor men more, is for this kind of fire that they have and that they kind of live by that. So I thought that was fascinating. And Tolkien does not say how specifically, but he does imply that Morgoth, now that he knows that the human and elves are chatting and getting to know each other, mm-hmm. he does imply that Morgoth wants to get these two groups to hate each other. That's kind of always his MO. He did this with the Noldor and the Valar and the other elves. Now he wants to do it with the men and the Sindarian elves and the Dark Elves. So I think Christopher /JR doesn't go into description of how Morgoth does this and what lies he spreads, but he does say that early seeds have been sown to get these two groups to not like each other. So that's obviously huge going forward.
And it seems like that won't be too hard for him to do.
No, there's a lot of things coming up very soon that is not good. So the last note of this chapter is basically just talking about how men and elves had a really good peace and friendship during this time. So much so that immortal and mortal, this is exactly how it's described, even shared some children, aka the men and the elves were getting down. Of these relationships, 3 offspring were had, and these 3 are Arendelle, who is a big one going forward.
You said he goes to the place I'm on? Okay,
correct.
okay.
He's kind of the one who basically opens up the passage again, but we'll get there. Elwing. And Elrond. Elrond is on Middle-earth officially. So this is something that Alex, our brother, always loves to point out that movies and shows get wrong, is that Galadriel is a heck of a lot older than Elrond is. Elrond to Galadriel is like a little brother, and that's why during the Rings of Power, their whole flirtation thing bothers him, because he's like, she sees him as like a little bro. Like that's not how this should go. So, but for lore accuracy, Elrond is half human, half elf. He is still immortal because of having that half elf in him. But he is now born kind of right before, in a very pivotal moment for Middle-earth, that Elrond will be a part of, and it's going to be exciting to see.
Are those 3 siblings, or are they from different relationships?
Elrond and Galadriel?
No. Arundel, Elwing.
Oh, they're technically all brothers.
All brothers, okay.
Yes. So I believe more are born after them, but these are the big 3 names I want you and our viewers to remember going forward.
Okay.
But yes, there are more half-elves out there, and in other lordoms, if you will, half-elves are looked down on. Like I'm thinking of like the Witcher universe. Half-elves are looked down on. There are, in Tolkien's world, the direct answer is no, they're not looked down on. But the more descriptive answer is they kind of are. They basically just get like comments made towards them. But like in terms of hierarchy, it does not hurt them to be a half-elf. Or half-born, if you will. So no one really looks down on Elrond for it, but people will make comments about it towards him. It's kind of like a jab.
Got it. So wait, this could be it. You can skip this question if you want. But okay, so Elrond is, oh my God, I can't think of her name. His daughter. Who is she?
Arwen.
Mm-hmm. So if she marries Aragorn, which she does, and they have kids, are they more than half human?
They're like quarter elf.
Yeah. So are they not immortal?
No.
They're not. Okay.
No, they live. So they've got Aragorn's blood, and he is, of course, he is a Dunedain, so he gets to live for a very long time. And they have 25% elf. So his kids live for a very long time, but they're not immortal.
Okay.
And they are described as having basically a stronger.
But Elrond's wife is.
Yes, she is a full elf.
Fully elf. So Arwen is 75-ish.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Side tangent.
No, tangents. This is what we do. This is for the lore, for the love of lore, some say. And that is it for this chapter. And I now have our Chat GPT outro. If you are ready. Here we go. And so, beneath the first light of the sun, a new chapter begins. The elves have waged their wars, the Noldor have defied their doom, but now come the second night. Mortal, fleeting, unshaped by the music of the Ayunar, destined to shake the very foundation of the world. The firstborn watch them with wonder and doubt. Morgoth sees them with hunger. And as the shadow of Angband looms ever larger, the race of men will soon learn that Middle-earth is no gentle land. Their choices will forge legends. Their courage will carve empires. And their fate is yet unwritten.
Oh.
Boom. I mean, it's pretty good.
The rest is still unwritten.
That's exactly what I thought when I saw that. Talk about a song that defined a generation. But that is it for Middle-earth.
Okay.
So again, this is kind of a lore dump.
I like a lore dump.
Yeah, this is a lore dump before things hit the fan.
All right.
Things are going to go 0 to 100 once again, as this book always does. But that's it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the info.
Of course, as always. And now we can transition to our other fantasy land of Westeros.
Hello, Westerosi travelers. We've arrived in the Kingdom of the Rock, and today we will be visiting the sites of the Westerlands. The Westerlands have a rich, literally rich.
Well, there it is.
A rich history earned from mining deep into their rocks for gold and silver. So this episode today is all about gold. Got the golden sun.
Yep.
The actual gold, all of it. This is a place where social climbing and family betrayals are par for the course.
Oh,
so
yay.
Let's unearth some lore. The Westerlands are full of rugged hills that conceal a vast network of caverns. Therefore, any bastards born here take the last name Hill.
Oh.
They do have some rolling plains, some forests, and some fertile fields in between all those hills, but it's pretty rocky over here. Especially the closer you get to the ocean, the rockier it gets. The western border of the Westerlands is the Sunset Sea. We haven't really talked a lot about the Sunset Sea yet,
No.
but it's a pretty big ocean off to the west. And then their northern border is Iron Man's Bay, and the Iron Islands lay in that bay, so they're right there.
Quick thing about the Sunset Sea. I assume it's in the west where the sun sets.
Definitely.
Austin.
Yep, you know.
That makes sense.
You know, it do be like
If I
that.
had coffee, I would have got it right, I swear.
The eastern border of the Westerlands butts up to the Riverlands, and then the southern border meets the Reach. We have not talked about the Reach yet, but we will soon. During the Dawn Age, it is known that the children of the forest and giants both dwelled here within the Westerlands. There are still ancient giant bones that you can see in certain places. And supposedly there was also these really great big lions that roamed the hills, but they are now thought to be extinct.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
I know. The ruling family of the Westerlands hails from Casterly Rock, which is also sometimes just called the Rock. Like
Dwayne the Rock?
Yeah.
He got a shout out.
He sure did. The castle itself is actually kind of cool, so I'm going to tell you about it real fast, if you don't mind. I don't know what I just did, but that's okay. So during the time of the first men, there was this teeny tiny little village near where Lannisport is now. And the legend says that there was this lion, this probably great big lion, that was preying on all the sheep in this village. And there was a young man named Corlos. He was the son of Castor. They didn't really have last names back then, I guess. And he tracked this lion back to its den, which was inside a cave of this huge, like, giant mountain near his village. And Corlos only had a spear with him, but he was able to kill the lion and his mate, but he left the cubs alive, which was pleasing to the old gods, you know, like he took care of the problem, but he didn't hurt the little babies.
Oh, good hurt on him.
Yeah. So supposedly the old gods then, since they were pleased, they sent this shaft of sunlight into the cave, and that enabled Corlos to see all these glimmers of like gold leading deeper into the cave. So eventually, the legend says it was Corlos. It might have been some of his family members or descendants. We don't really know. But eventually, they began to like mine into that mountain for that gold. And then as they got deeper and deeper and deeper, they just built fortifications into the mountain to protect their treasure.
Oh.
So there was all these tunnels that had been mined. But those were eventually turned into halls and chambers and living quarters. And thus, House Casterly was established.
That's a sick castle.
Yeah. The Casterlys never ruled as kings, but they were easily the wealthiest family in all of Westeros, not just the Westerlands, like the whole shebang.
Wow. They get some money.
They do. Surprise to no one, at some point during the Age of Heroes, the Casterlys suddenly disappear from history, and they are quickly replaced by the Lannisters.
Where did they go?
No one knows exactly how or why, but the Casterlys were ousted from their lands and their home. There's a few different versions of the story according to legends, and we're gonna explore those because they're a little bit fun. So
Okay.
if this is your type of fun, hopefully.
I think that's why they're here. I hope it is.
All of these legends involve this whimsical little character named Lann the Clever.
Lann,
like Lann. It is said that this is who House Lannister is named after.
That tracks.
So in legend number 1, Lann the Clever coats himself in butter, squeezes himself through a narrow crack in the mountain until he got all the way into the living quarters where the Casterlys lived. But once he made it there, he started playing tricks on them to convince them that their house was haunted, and then they fled the premises in fear of a ghost.
Wow.
So there's that. Legend number 2.
A butter man. I like number 1.
A slicked up man.
Yep.
Legend number 2 says that Lan used the same narrow crack, same thing, but he coaxed a horde of rats, mice, and other vermin into the chambers inside, and that's what forced the Casterlys out.
I'm glad these legends are really grounded and, it could definitely happen.
Yeah. And then the third legend is the most George R.R. of the 3.
Is it going to get crazier?
This one This one says that Lan snuck a bunch of the lions into the castle, but he told the lions to only kill the male members of the family.
Oh.
So that he could take it upon himself to impregnate all the female members of the family.
Oh, we're Georgian.
Yeah. And then therefore that would kind of get rid of the Casterly name, and now all these offspring are going to be Lannisters because he's the one that, So.
Yeah.
George B. Georgian.
George B. Georgian.
On this one.
Holy moly.
There is one archmaester who debates all of the legends and provides us with a most likely scenario. He just suggests that at some point there was a Casterly lord that employed a guy named Lan, and this particular Casterly lord had no sons but many daughters, and then this Lan ended up marrying the eldest daughter. She gave birth to a son, etc.
Oh, that feels a little more
normal,
realistic.
But I personally love legend number 1.
I want the Butterman. Give me the Butterman haunting a castle any day.
So yeah, that's just kind of my personal fave. Hopefully you have a fave version as well.
It's got to be Butterman.
So yeah, anyway, now we've got House Lannister. They are in existence. They obviously chose a lion for their sigil, and their official house words, which I always forget because we never hear them. Like literally you don't ever hear these words, but they are "Hear me roar."
Oh, it's Katy Perry.
Right.
Oh my God.
But their more common phrase that you do hear all of the time is, we all know it and love it. It's "A Lannister always pays his debts."
Yep. I thought that was the house motto.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
You would think, but.
Sigil.
Yeah. Because all the gold they have, they pay.
Yeah.
So now that they control the castle that they refer to as the Rock, they continue to mine for gold, and as they do so, they add on to their castle, but it's built within the mountain. Like the castle is literally built into the mountain. From the outside, the mountain itself supposedly looks like a lion sleeping. It is 6 miles east to west and 2 miles wide, I guess, if you want to. So it's big. It's a big mountain.
That's a big old mountain.
Yeah. The peak is 2,100 feet tall, which makes it taller than the highest point on the wall and also taller than the high tower in Old Town, which I did not realize till I started doing research for this episode, because I just always like to forget about the Lannisters because I don't like them. But once I started diving, I was like, oh, dang, they
got some sauce.
They got some stuff. So I think I might have misspoken in an earlier episode when I said that those 2 things are the tallest things in Westeros. They actually apparently are not.
Oh.
So it has natural defenses that are pretty strong, being that it's built inside of a mountain. And then over time, they've added on extra walls, gates, watchtowers that have windows for archers and all of that. It's pretty much even like as impregnable as the Eyrie. And even Visenya Targaryen herself, who did make it into the Eyrie, if you remember from last episode, even she said she wouldn't have been able to fly her dragon into the Rock, and that trying to burn it from the outside wouldn't do any good.
Wow.
So pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And also, who knew? I didn't know that till I started reading this stuff. This part's kind of funny. The main entrance into the castle is a natural cavern towards the base of the mountain, so it's like a cave. but they've built it up into this grand entrance that they call the Lion's Mouth.
Oh.
It's got a huge staircase that leads up to it. It's wide enough for 20 riders to ride up the stairs. And then on the other side of the mountain, like on the ocean side, there are more natural caverns, and that's kind of their shipyard. It's pretty small for a shipyard because Lannisport, the city, is only a mile away, and that's where most ships are going to dock, is over in that city.
I see.
So, yeah. Inside of their castle, they have this place called the Golden Gallery, where they display all of their treasures.
That's quite the flex.
It is. Everything in this room is gilded. The walls are literal gold.
Oh my God.
Insane. They also have this fun little hallway called the Hall of Heroes, where they inter members of their family who died valiantly in battle, I guess. And then they also display their ancient armor there with them. So, yeah.
Must be nice.
Must be. They do have themselves a little tiny godswood. It's in a cave that gets a little bit of natural sunlight. They call it the Stone Garden. So not a lot of plants. But it does have a weirwood tree. However, the weirwood tree is 1/10 the size of a normal one.
Oh, it's like a little bonsai tree.
It is. And it's got twisted, tangled little roots that are kind of starting to choke out all the other plants. So I think the old gods don't be happy.
They like it there.
So yeah, that concludes our tour of the rock. Please ensure you have not accidentally obtained any of the golden treasures on our tour, or else you will be asked to pay your debts.
There it is. The Lannisters.
Okay, before we dive in on House Lannister, let's also talk really quickly about some of the other landmarks in the Westerlands. So just a second ago, I was talking about Lannisport. Lannisport is only a mile south of Casterly Rock, but it is considered a separate city. It's walled, and it's at the intersection of 3 different roads, which I think makes it, that's what gives it its power, or I guess.
So it's got the port, and it's also got 3 big roads coming in. So that's a trade hub.
Yeah, the 3 roads are the Ocean Road, the Gold Road, and the River Road. Plus, it's a port, like he was saying, sits right on the beaches of the Sunset Sea. It is smaller than Old Town in King's Landing, but it is larger than White Harbor and Gulltown. Wow. So, as my son would say, it's a medium city.
It's a medium city. Yep.
It's not small, it's not large. It's medium. Supposedly, it's kind of ruled by a lesser branch of House Lannister, but it's also listed as one of the titles of whoever currently holds Casterly Rock. So, it could also just be governed by the actual House Lannister. No one knows, and it doesn't really matter. But the city is famous for having a bunch of goldsmiths who are known for being able to make lots of different things out of gold. And they produce their own flavor of wine. It's like a spiced honey wine.
Oh, it actually sounds kind of good.
It does. They have their own city watch for a police force. And supposedly the quality of their brothels rivals King's Landing.
Oh, my God.
Yuck.
George, there's some facts about cities that you just don't have to include.
We don't need to know.
But he does.
Yep. The majority of the Lannister fleet is actually anchored here because it's bigger. There's a small portion of it anchored under the castle, like in their own little shipyard, but most of it is down here in Lannisport. And then a lot of the merchants here in Lannisport, which is way off in the west of Westeros, they actually have a counterpart or like somebody that they communicate regularly with over in the free cities of Essos. And I think because for people who live in Westeros, obviously like Essos is considered, goods from Essos would be considered exotic. But I think for people in Essos, if you have gotten goods from Lannisport, that's probably considered exotic because it's so far away and everything is gold. Like, I don't know. I think it's probably... They just kind of see it that way.
That makes sense.
And then there's this other little castle called the Golden Tooth. It's just a small-ish castle, but it's a really strong and well-defended castle. It sits right on the hill road, and it kind of stands guard between the Riverlands and the Westerlands. It's really close to the border. And it is said that if you're trying to invade the Westerlands from the east, you do have to make it past the Tooth first, which is supposed to be difficult to do. But they also have a network of mines inside of their little mountain where gold is found in abundance. And it is held by House Lefford. And that house dates back to the Andal invasion. So they were formed by the union of
They just got
First
gold
Men of
everywhere
Andal.
over here.
They do. It's a lot of places. And then another fun place is called Fair Isle. And this is an island. It is separated from the Westerland. I think of it as like Catalina Island off California. Like it's
The Catalina wine mixer.
yeah. But it's still governed by the Westerlands. It is held by House Farman. And it's important because during the Age of Heroes, the men of Fair Isle were responsible for guarding like the whole west coast of Westeros, like kind of protecting Westeros from the Ironborn. Because the Ironborn, we're going to talk about them next episode, but they are known for being like reavers. Like they just kind of land somewhere and steal a bunch of stuff and go back to their homes.
So they're Viking-ish.
Viking-ish, yeah. So they, the people of Fair Isle did a mostly good job of, protecting the coastlands from the Ironborn. There was a brief period where the Iron Islands gained control of Fair Isle, but that only lasted one generation. And then once the Andals arrived, it got added to the Westerlands, and it has remained that way ever since. Fair Isle has been visited by some important characters throughout the books, such as Princess Rhaena, and she's the sister of Old King Jaehaerys. Old King Jaehaerys he's the king at the very, very, very beginning of House of the Dragon, like episode 1. Like him dying is what decides that Viserys is going to become king. So anyway, this Princess Rhaena is that guy's sister, and she visited there. Alan of Hull, which is Adam's brother from House of the Dragon. So Adam is at the end of season 2. Adam, he gets a dragon. I think it's Sea Smoke, he gets that dragon. So it's his brother Alan who is kind of like rejecting Corlys Velaryon's love right now because Corlys is trying to like show both Alan and Adam some love, and Alan's like, I don't need your love. Yep. So anyway, he ends up at some point visiting Fair Isle, and then Stannis Baratheon visits Fair Isle, and so does Asha Greyjoy, who in the show they name her Yara Greyjoy, but in the books her name is Asha. So
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, then we come to Castamere, and
Yes.
Castamere is now a ruined castle, which sits on top of a gold and silver mine. It's built really, really similarly to Casterly Rock, which does come into play later. So eventually the gold and silver dried up inside of their mountain, but the castle was still enlarged inside of the hill that it was built into. It was the former seat of House Reyne, like Reyne, who was nearly as wealthy as the Lannisters for quite a long time because of all the gold that they were able to mine. There's a lot of lore about the reigns of Castamere, and of course we all know the infamous song.
Yes.
So we're
Editor Austin, cue it right now.
So we're going to dive into that in just a hot minute because it's deeply intertwined with Lannister lore as well. So,
great song.
You ready for House Lannister?
I'm ready.
Okay, put your miner helmets on, turn on the headlamps because there is some gold in the Lannister lore today.
That was a snazzy sentence right there.
Right off the bat, the Lannisters are typically described as being pretty attractive. They are, as George says, they are emerald of eye and gold of hair. Their house colors are crimson and gold, and their household guard is called the Red Cloaks. So they have their own little household guard. So another fun fact is that they did once own, or possess, I guess, a Valyrian steel sword. Oh. And it was called Bright Roar, I guess.
Nice name. Bright. Goes with the lion, too.
Yeah, Bright Roar. They paid an absolute fortune for this Valyrian steel sword. And they purchased it from Valyria right before the doom of Valyria. So
good timing.
Yeah. And then it was lost only a century later because their current king, whose name was King Tommen II, he decided to sail his Lannister fleet all the way over to the ruined Valyria to try to plunder all of their secrets, their spells, their magic, how they work with gold and dragons and everything. He wanted to find it all out. There is evidence that they reached Volantis, which is a free city in Essos, kind of near Valyria. There's an ancient chronicle from Volantis that states, a golden fleet bearing the Lion King stayed here to gather supplies, and they were lavished with gifts from the Triarchs. So they got to Volantis. However, after that, they kind of disappeared. They were neither he nor his fleet were ever seen or heard from again after that. And then Bright Roar was never recovered. So it gone. Yeah.
I want to know what happened there.
Right, I know.
Like, there's so much secrecy about it. Every time somebody goes here, they either disappear or they come back in boils or whatever. It's just like...
Yeah. Or they get the dragon skin, like the thingy. Yeah.
George, tell me, what's going on?
Right. What is it? So there is some more lore on how the Lannisters were first men who initially opposed the Andals and then eventually decided to accommodate them. We're going to kind of skip all that to the juicy stuff. And the juicy stuff doesn't start till well after the Targaryens have established their dynasty. So yeah, we're just going to skip. We've talked enough about the Andals. I feel like we're going to skip all that. We are now in the Targaryen era. About the first 100 years that the Targaryens rule, the Lannisters just kind of keep to themselves. They just kind of hole up in Casterly Rock pretty quietly. They're not really in King's Landing at all. None of their family members are part of the small council or anything. They kind of just stay out of the political drama. That changes at about the moment that the Dance of the Dragons begins. And you kind of see that in House of the Dragon. You see that, I forget his name, but one of the Lannisters gets put on the small council kind of like on accident almost. But during this time, they begin to closely ally themselves with House Hightower, and they are definitely Team Green. They are not Team Black. And the Hightowers and Lannisters, they have they're like kindred spirits almost, because they both basically control the two biggest port cities on the West Coast. And they both kind of begin to resent the fact that the Velaryons are always favored by the Targaryens due to their prowess at sea, because the Velaryons have always been good sailors. But they're like, hey, we're just as good. We have just as big of port cities as the Velaryons. Why do we always get left out of everything? So, yeah, those two houses remain allies throughout the dance. And then when the dance was over, the Lannisters had pretty much secured themselves a permanent and prominent spot at court in King's Landing. So they're in the big times, you could say. We're going to fast forward another couple hundred years to this dude named Lord Gerald Lannister.
Good old Gerald.
Gerald. He accedes to the Lord of Casterly Rock after the deaths of his older brother and his niece. And it was kind of under strange circumstances. Some people were like, did he kill them?
Oh.
But it was never confirmed. And then once he did take over, he was kind of a good dude. Like, he was referred to as Gerald the Golden. He brought about a very prosperous era to the Westerlands. He had 2 wives because the first one died, and then 4 sons. The second wife gave birth to 4 sons. And he ruled for a long time, like 31 years, which in Westeros times, yeah, that's a long rule. And even though he helped build wealth and power, he also tallied up himself a roster of enemies. Like, his second wife kind of disappeared under mysterious circumstances.
Oh, boy.
And then his oldest son, Tywald, died in battle shortly after his second wife had died. So he lost 2 people kind of back to back.
Jeez.
So that oldest son, Tywald, before he died in battle, he had been betrothed to this lady, and she's named Lady Ellen Reyne. And I told you we would revisit these Reynes, Reyne. This Lady Ellen, she is described as strong-willed and hot-tempered. And she had been counting on being basically like the Lady of Casterly Rock. and then her betrothed got himself killed in battle. So when she learned of this, she immediately starts trying to persuade the next oldest son, Tion, to set aside his own betrothal and propose to her instead.
It's a bold move, Kat.
She's like, I will be the lady of Casterly Rock.
She wants that queendom.
Gerald himself was opposed to this idea, but he was also old, battle-weary, and grief-stricken. So he had just gotten back from a battle where he lost his son, and before he went to that battle, his wife had died. So he was kind of like, meh.
Meh. The sounds of what a Gerald, I think, would make.
So he kind of just let it happen. She did get her way. Tion set aside his original betrothed and married Lady Ellen.
Wow.
And Lord Gerald kind of retreated to his own books and studies and stuff like that. And so Lady Ellen gets to become the first lady, if you will, of House Lannister. And she was apparently fit for the role. She helped plan numerous tourneys and balls and entertainment for the people of the Westerlands. She also starts bringing in lots and lots of her own family members and handing out important titles and jobs and favors and all kinds of things within Casterly Rock, which many other families began to resent because all of a sudden now there's all these reigns, because she's a reign, and there's all these reigns up in Casterly Rock with all these favors that nobody else gets. So meanwhile, Gerald's next oldest son is Tytos, and Tytos married this chick named Lady Jane Marbrand, and she's going to be important also. So shortly after both of these women begin living permanently within Casterly Rock, the men were all called away to a battle by King Aegon V. So the battle is over on the East Coast. All the men go over there. The battle was won rather quickly, and very few people died, but one of the people that died was Lord Tion.
Oh my God.
Which now leaves Lady Ellen a widow.
Again.
Well, if she was one the first time.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. You would think this would make Lord Gerald just be like, oh my God, now my second son. But this actually kind of like rouses him from his grief. And he's like, hey, somebody needs to take control away from this Lady Ellen. And he pretty much does kind of take control back from her. And because he now has to shift his focus to his third-born son, Tytos, to prepare this guy to be the Lord of Casterly Rock, where this guy probably never thought he would ever be Lord of Casterly Rock because he's the third-born son. So that's where Lord Gerald is focusing now. The other problem with Tytos is that he has always been kind of unpromising as a lord. He is weak-willed and prone to indecisiveness. So, this is a pretty pivotal turning point in the story because at this point, all of Lady Ellen's family members abruptly leave court and return to their respective lands and castles. And the reign of the reigns, get it?
Yes.
They were reigning. And their name is
music right now.
Their reign has ended pretty swiftly, and everyone now kind of looks to Tytos and his wife, Lady Jane. The reign of the Reigns has ended pretty swiftly, and everyone in the Westerlands is now looking to Tytos and his wife, Lady Jane. So, out with the Reigns and in with the Jane.
Heck yeah. Taylor, put that in a song.
So Lady Ellen stayed at Casterly Rock, or tried to, and the rivalry between the two women rapidly escalated from small little feuds to all-out hatred. It even went as far as Lady Ellen trying to seduce Tytos and convince him to leave Lady Jane. And that is what earned Lady Ellen a quick removal from Casterly Rock by Lord Gerald. When he found out about it, he sent ravens out that night, and within 2 weeks, he had found a new husband for her, and he ended up marrying her off to this guy named Lord Tarbeck, who is one of his bannermen. And Lord Tarbeck is going to come back up, so don't forget his name either. But After that moment, Lady Ellen never returned to Casterly Rock, but she did continue her rivalry with Lady Jane. They began to have this little pissing contest, but with childbirth, so like a birthing contest, I guess. Lady Jane's firstborn child was a boy, and she named him Tywin. Yes. Yes,
Tywin.
friends. We have arrived at the birth of one of our favorite villains, Tywin Lannister.
Wow.
And boy, does he have a crazy backstory that I had no idea about until I did research for this episode. So it might seem odd that the first like big character deep dive that we're going to do is for one of the villains. But I'm going to rationalize it for you because I like to rationalize all of my decisions. Tywin is technically from one generation before all of the main protagonists in book one, like Ned and Robert and Catelyn. Tywin is actually a generation older than them. So, and then in the later books, it kind of moves on to those people's children, like generation 3. So really timeline-wise, like it makes sense that we're starting with Tywin because he's older.
Yep.
There's my rationalization.
Is confirmed.
Should you choose to accept. So here we go. Tywin is born to Lord Tydos and Lady Jane, and his grandfather, Lord Gerald, did know him briefly before he died. And then when that happened, his father, Tydos, inherited Casterly Rock and the Westerlands at the age of 24. Tydos was incredibly unsuited for pretty much all of the duties that he was supposed to oblige in these roles. He was very slow to anger, very quick to forgive. It earned him the nickname the Laughing Lion.
Oh.
For about I'm guessing about 6 months, people loved it. They were like, oh, this is great. This guy doesn't care about anything. And then it didn't take much longer than that for people to realize he was real easy to manipulate. So he soon...
Oof.
Yeah, had all kinds of these petty lords trying to grasp power, wealth, and land, and a lot of them were successful. He kind of just loaned out large sums of money from Casterly Rock, rarely asked for or followed up on repayment of any of these loans. And then eventually, anytime he tried to enforce any sort of law or rule or repayment or anything, he was just ignored, which is a tough look for a guy that's supposed to rule over everyone. His bannermen began to mock him, and then it grew from just mocking him kind of into despising him. So the Lannisters took a big hit to all of the wealth and notoriety that Gerald had kind of garnered for them and worked really hard to do. And then his son, Tywin, Tydos' son Tywin, is now about 10 years old, and even at 10, he's catching on to oh my gosh, my dad can't rule. He's not doing
Sounds
it very
well.
well.
Tywin.
Yeah, right. So he, even at that young age, kind of started to speak out against some of the things his dad was doing and saying. And his dad, he didn't put him down or anything or try to tell him he was wrong, but his dad did send him away to King's Landing to serve as a cupbearer for King Aegon. So, during Tywin's childhood, while he's away at King's Landing being a cupbearer, House Rain and House Tarbeck are quietly gathering wealth and popularity. After the dramatic exit of Lady Ellen from Casterly Rock, she's actually from afar. She's able to kind of manipulate Tydos by sending her brothers in to ask for all these loans with absolutely no plans to repay any of these. So she used that money to bring her new House Tarbeck to the forefront, and then the Rains did the same. They just kind of kept adding on to their own wealth. And back at Casterly Rock, Lady Jane gives birth to a fourth son, but she does not ever recover from her childbirth, and she passes away.
Nope.
And it's said that part of Tydos died that day with her, and the Westerlands kind of fell into disarray. It got so bad that King Aegon had to keep sending his own men from King's Landing over into the Westerlands to kind of bring it back to order. And keep in mind, Tywin is in King's Landing, so he's hearing about all this stuff from an outside source. He's not in the Westerlands experiencing it. He's hearing about it from the outside, and he's hearing how it's not just the people in the Westerlands that are saying his dad can't rule. It's people outside of the Westerlands are also like, bro, your dad's not, he ain't cutting it.
Your dad kind of stinks.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting, and I think he's no doubt growing a little bit resentful of his dad and his dad's lack of leadership skills. He's also basically growing up with King Aegon's grandson, Aerys, who, because they're about the same age, they're similar in age, and eventually King Aegon dies because he's old, and Aerys's dad, Jaehaerys, becomes king.
Very similar names.
Yeah. They all the Targaryens have similar. This is King Jaehaerys II. Keep in mind, this is not old King Jaehaerys from House of the Dragon. This is the second Jaehaerys. And this King Jaehaerys gets involved in a war called the War of the Ninepenny Kings. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole deep dive. I'm not going to go into that war. But Tywin and his brothers Kevan and Tyget, all three of them fought in this war, and they all fought really well. Tywin and Kevan both get knighted afterwards, and then Tywin is given the honor of knighting Prince Aerys, his friend, after the war. So they all did really well, proved themselves in battle, made all these friends, got knighted, all this stuff. And then meanwhile, their father, Tydos, remained behind. He did not fight in the war. He stayed at Casterly Rock, and he has now taken up with a low-born woman who is the wet nurse for the newly born, the new baby son.
Scandalous.
Yeah. So Tywin comes back from this war heated. I just fought in this whole war, got knighted, and my dad is over here being a slacker, taken up with a wet nurse. Ugh.
Yep.
So Tydos...
There's some things to fix.
Yeah. Tywin comes back to Casterly Rock and kind of takes the reins and starts demanding repayment for all of the loans that Tydos gave out. To do this, he forms this new company of soldiers. They've all been recently seasoned in battle in that war that they were all just in. So these are hard soldiers, not just we're the city watch of Lannisport,
Right, they've seen some things.
Yeah. And these are the people he sends to carry out the deed of getting all these loans to be repaid. And he gives command of that company to his brother Kevan. Some people paid up right away. Some people sent back their children as hostages until they could repay.
Oh.
And then some people openly defied Tywin. And if you know anything about Tywin, that's not a good...
You ain't going to let that slide.
Not a good move. And the Reynes specifically, Lord Reyne, supposedly laughed in Kevin's face when Kevan demanded the repayment.
Oh, that's going to go over well.
Yeah. And then Lord Tarbeck, and this is where Lady Ellen is. She is a Reyne by birth, but she is now married to a Tarbeck. Lord Tarbeck unwisely rides to Casterly Rock to try to talk his way out of it, thinking he's going to be talk with Tydos and talk his way out of it, but he ends up... Tywin greets him at the gate. He doesn't even let him see Tydos. Tywin is right there, immediately seizes Lord Tarbeck and throws him in a dungeon. So Lady Ellen is not pleased by this. Her new husband is in a dungeon in Casterly Rock. She responds to this by capturing 3 young Lannisters and holding them in her own prison cells at Tarbeck Hall. And this does upset Tydos because her 3 prisoners are all young, could almost still be considered kids, whereas, Tywin is holding this lord of a whole thing. So Tydos does kind of step in. This is about the only time he ever overrules Tywin, and he does order a release of Lord Tarbeck in exchange for the 3 young Lannister hostages. This exchange of hostages happens at Castamere, where House Reyne is from, and Lord Reyne holds this big feast in honor of the peace that has been made between House Lannister and House Tarbeck. But guess who is not in attendance at this feast?
Taro.
Tywin Lannister sits it out. He doesn't need no party. He doesn't need no peace. So this peace actually only lasts a couple months. Eventually, after a few months of quote-unquote peace, Tywin sends ravens to House Tarbeck and House Reyne, demanding that the lord from each house present themselves at Casterly Rock to answer for their crimes.
Oh.
But this request gets ignored, as he kind of predicted it would. So Instead, what they both do, both houses renounce their fealty to Casterly Rock and begin acting in open revolt, like they're trying to gather their own bannermen, basically. So Tywin promptly calls his banners, rides out, doesn't even inform his dad, Tydos, or even ask his dad's permission.
Tydos seems a little irrelevant at this point.
Yeah. And Tywin and his company, they first go to House Tarbeck, and they go there with such haste, that the Tarbecks don't have any time to gather any knights or bannermen or nothing. And they are pretty much slaughtered in a real short little battle.
Woof.
And Lady Ellen is there. She stays inside her castle thinking that the walls of the castle are going to protect her. But she does send out a couple ravens to her brothers, the Rains, to tell them, like, hey, you should come over here and help me.
Yeah.
But the Lannister host is able to build siege weapons within about a day. They start launching these siege weapons at the small little Tarbeck castle, and it collapses down upon Ellen and her son.
Oh, jeez.
Yep. And then Tywin orders all the rest of it to be set on fire, and that is about the moment that the Rain brothers and their army arrive. They arrive to the site of Tarbeck Hall in flames, and they do kind of use the element of surprise. They did charge at the Lannister army, and they kind of have the element of surprise because the Lannisters are like, we're done for the day. We're setting it on fire. The end. But the Lannisters outnumber them like at least 3-1. Some people say 5-1. So they recover from that surprise tactic pretty quickly. And then the Rains have to retreat back to...
Bad day for the Rains.
Mm-hmm. They retreat back to Castamere. Now, if you recall when I was describing Castamere, I said it's built real similarly to Casterly Rock. They had mines too. They kind of just added to their castle as they mined further and further into their mountain. And Tywin knows that. And Tywin knows, because he grew up in Casterly Rock, that there's a way to kind of beat that. So here we go.
Uh-oh. This is going to get dark.
Yep. So the Rains go back to their castle at Castamere. 3 days later, the entire Lannister host shows up at Castamere, and the Rains retreat deep within their own walls so that they can't be attacked, which they thought was safe. Like
You would think it's safe.
Yeah. We know our halls better than they do. It's kind of a maze in there a little bit, so we know where we can hide, that they can't get us, blah, blah, blah. They did send one of their brothers out to try to offer peace terms, but Tywin wouldn't hear of it. Instead, he orders the mines to be sealed from the outside.
Oh, boy.
He buried, his men that did it, they buried the gates that were the entrance. It was said that, it was like they took all these tools and knocked down like big boulders, and then they covered the cracks with like mud and earth, and it was the whole process. But basically, it's done sealed. She sealed. And then he ordered a nearby stream to be diverted straight into one of the entrances of the mine. Although he sealed it well enough that there were no gaps that any men or humans could get through, the water found a way, as water does.
My goodness.
So
he could have just at least buried him alive, and he said, no, I'm going to drown you too.
So of the 300 plus men, women, and children that Lord Rain took into hiding with him, none were ever seen or heard from again.
Brutal.
There were some guards that were posted kind of just up there just to make sure, I guess. Some of them reported one night, because, it took the water a while to flood the whole dang castle. So apparently one random night, some guards reported hearing faint screams and shouts, and then by morning, all was silent. And no one, still to this modern present day Game of Thrones, no one has ever reopened Castamere. But there is a real cool song written about it. And now,
cool song.
Now you understand the meaning. The Rains,
Oh.
if you're thinking of like the water, the Rains, but also the Rains, that's their family name.
Yep.
The Rains of Castamere. And then
That is
This is also the song that plays during the Red Wedding. I believe in the book, too. I know for sure during the show.
Makes sense.
And that is how Tywin Lannister became Tywin effing Lannister.
Tywin. What is a problem?
I mean, it kind of, like, it a little bit makes you root for him, because, like, his
dad... badass.
Right. Like, his dad was, like, not a good ruler, and he was like, I'm gonna fix it.
And he did, just through force, and dude just drowned 300 people.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's
wow.
The old...
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty... I mean...
He's bad.
We're rooting for cold-blooded people. I mean, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
But that's brutal.
Yeah.
The Reigns, man, don't mess with Tywin.
Nope.
That'd be so good for TV. They need to do that.
They do. Like a Tywin origin story.
Yeah.
Just a little, like a mini series. It doesn't have to be a whole show.
That was incredible. Yeah, just give me like the thing with the dunk in the egg. Just do that with Tywin.
Yeah.
God, that'd be cool. I'm sure they will at some point. He's way too too good of a character to
not
do a show for.
Yep.
Wow. Lannisters, man, they got some history.
They do.
It's kind of a mystery how they came into power too, which is fascinating.
Yeah. Lan the Clever.
Lan. Good old Lan.
Buttered up, slicked up
I
man.
hope it's a buttered up Lan. I hope that's how they started. That was incredible. Well, I think, is that it? Is that
That's
it
a
for
wrap.
today's?
That's a wrap for me.
Well, all right, fellow adventurers. That is it for today's episode into our journey into the realms of Westeros and Middle-earth. And we hope you've enjoyed journeying through the histories, mysteries, and fascinating lore of these worlds.
We will return with insights, laughs, and maybe even some unexpected dragons of wisdom along the way. Next up in our Middle-earth adventure, we will learn of the ultimate fate of Fëanor and the first great battle of Middle-earth. Our tour of Westeros will introduce us to the Drowned God, while we tour the Iron Islands and meet House Greyjoy.
And we really encourage you guys to join our conversations on our Instagram. It is @fortheloveof.lore. Share your theories, tell us your grievances, or just chat about how you discovered these epic sagas yourself.
Like, what's your favorite character arc in Game of Thrones, or your favorite battle scene in The Lord of the Rings?
Or are you rooting for a buttered up Lan over, what were the other ones?
The Vermin?
The Vermin Lan.
The Vermin and
or just the natural...
Right. The lion. He snuck the lion.
Yeah, he snuck the lion.
Yeah.
Which one? Which of those three?
Right. Tell us.
Let us know.
Please.
But thanks you guys for tuning in, and remember, the best adventures are the ones we take together.
We swear it by the old gods and the new.
Peace.